Good morning. Today we jump onto something new from our previous few lectures on globalization. I'm introducing to you Gramsci. Gramsci was an Italian neo-Marxist, to say, one of the most important thinkers in the field of Marxian thought. Um, he was born in Italy and he wrote some of his most seminal works while he was in prison, and those writings are compiled to known as the prison notebooks. So I'm picking up one of those small part from those prison notebooks, and I'm going to talk to you about the history of the subaltern classes, ideology, and cultural material, the ideological themes. So there are three distinct parts to this whole talk, and based on Gramsci's writing, and I would suggest why don't you all go through about the person Gramsci, um, read about him and try to understand him and his writings, and then come back to this lecture and understand, and you will see, you will get to know his work even more. And there are also many other important theoretical works of Gramsci which we can talk about later, but for today I picked up this particular area. History of the subaltern classes. Now the history part. So Gramsci's case that the subaltern classes are the anti to what are the ruling classes, are the antithesis to the ruling classes. So the ruling classes, according to him, unite and historically form what we understand as the concept of the state, or the government, or the country, or the power center. So the ruling classes unite, and they form this, what we understand as the concept of the state. So the history of the ruling class is but the history of the state, or vice versa. Their unity, this unification of the ruling class, however, results from the organic relation between state or political society and civil society, because the relation between civil society and as civil society is what you call as the civil groups, people, and the political society, or what we understand as the state. This relationship is important to give rise to the understanding of why do people come and unite together. Why do you think people come and unite together and become a ruling class? Because it depends on the relationship of civil groups and the understanding of politics. People unite because they want to rule, because they want to become powerful. People unite, groups come and unite because they know they can become powerful in this manner of unification, and this is what constitutes what we understand as the ruling class. Therefore, by this analogy, the ruling class are united, but then the subaltern class are not united because they are not the ruling class, they are the opposite to it. So they are not united according to this definition of Gramsci. So, and if they are not united, they cannot be united until they become the state. And how would they become the state? By becoming united and forming power alliances, what we call as power alliances. So until and unless they unite, they don't become the state, and they are not united because, as you understand, they are subaltern. So the subaltern is a constantly fleeting term according to Gramsci. One who is not united is subaltern. One who is not in power is subaltern. And that is why the history of the subaltern class is intertwined with the history of the civil society. It's a very important relationship because the civil society and the political society together form and become the state. Now, to understand this nature of the subaltern groups, to understand why subaltern groups are not in power, to understand how ruling class deals with subaltern groups, we have to understand and study a few things according to Gramsci. What are they? Let us look into them. He says we have to study the objective formation of the subaltern social group. Why was the subaltern group created? By changes in the sphere of economic production, origins in pre-existing social groups whose mentality, ideology and aim they conserve for a time. So we have to understand the concept of the subaltern group with the changing economic production system, how they existed before the coming of social groups, how they existed after this, how the economic change, economic production system had a change in their fortunes, how subaltern groups merge and dismerge and formed alliances during this. So what was the objectivity of this formation? Number two, their active, we need to study their active or passive affiliation to the dominant political function. Now, the relationship between the subaltern and the ruling class has, and their passive support or the active support needs to be studied. So, because why do you think the subaltern groups would form alliances or support the powers that be? Because it would also want some of its demands to be fulfilled in society, and they would then attempt, because no group is apolitical, they would constantly try to form some kind of alliance with the groups that are in power. So passively or actively they would be trying to make their point make their point, try to press for their demands so that they are fulfilled, or and even if not fulfilled, at least they know that these kind of demands are there. We have to study the birth of new parties of the dominant groups, intended to conserve the ascent of the subaltern groups and to maintain control over them. So we have to study how new and new dominant groups are formed. This chemistry of the formation of new dominant groups, and how this new dominant group either have the ascent of the subaltern groups, or rather say the passive support of the subaltern groups, or let's say how do they maintain control over the subaltern group. So what is the manner and method in which these new groups come up, and how do they maintain control over the subaltern groups? Next, we have to also study the formation which the subaltern groups themselves produce in order to press schemes of a limited and partial. As I said, that they try to press their own demands for their own claims and rightful demands that the subaltern groups might have. So what are the formation? These multiple subaltern groups come together and form themselves. What are these alliances? What are these mergers that they do themselves so that their claims can be pressed for? The next is, we have to study the new formations which assert the autonomy of the subaltern groups, but within the old framework. So what would the ruling class want? Let us be clear for some time. What does do the ruling class want? The ruling class would always want that the subaltern groups remain in their own position, by hook or by crook. And there are ways, we will look later into the presentation. So the subaltern groups, how do they assert, how the new autonomy happens to the subaltern, how do they gain a little bit of power, but within the old framework. So they remain subaltern, but they gain little power, little autonomy. So how do these ruling elites create these false illusions of autonomy, of power to these subaltern groups, so that the subaltern groups remain within the old framework but are happy in a sense. So this is the whole idea, and all of these points that we have mentioned here, this phases can the study of these phases can be studied actually and broken down further, or probably there might be intermediate phases to all of these ideas, and or a combination of phases, let's say, among this. So because this relationship between the ruling class, the political society, and the subaltern groups is a constant matter of negotiation. It's a constant negotiation of power, because the ruling class does not want to lose its power. So probably in some cases it would provide the subaltern groups with some autonomy, with some power, as a kind of a security that it will remain in power. So it would have the it would have the support of the subaltern group to stay in power also. And there are new formations, new alliances constantly happening within the subaltern groups, between the subaltern group and the ruling class, and these permutations and combinations are a constant matter of negotiation, a negotiation of power. Therefore, Gramsci argues that the history of the subaltern groups is a very complex one. Supremacy of a social group, he argues, the ruling class here, I mean, the supremacy of the social group, he says, can be manifested in two ways. One is domination, and the other, by domination, of course, you understand physical domination probably, and the other is the intellectual and moral leadership. So the way in which dominant groups have asserted their dominance has happened in mostly two manners, according to Gramsci. A dominant social group therefore dominates these antagonistic forces, and by antagonistic forces it does not necessarily mean enemies, but maybe people on the other side, by even armed forces. And this is the extreme kind of a domination. There can be dominations of other kind, like, let's say, legislation, let's say. So domination constantly happens from the superior dominant groups. The other is a very important form of domination, and that is leadership and intellectual and moral leadership, because leadership is, after all, that ultimate which helps in gaining government power. You need to be leader oriented, and this kind of a leadership has helped the ruling class to have an intellectual and moral say over the other groups, over the subaltern groups. So this attitude and how the action of the dominant groups happen upon the subaltern groups also needs to be studied according to Gramsci. Now we come to the second part of this essay by Gramsci. He talks about ideology, and this is very important. This is a series of ideas which are all interconnected. Now, what is ideology? The original meaning of ideology was the science of ideas, or let's say analysis of ideas, or an investigation into the origin of ideas. That's what Gramsci tells us. So idea was in fact an aspect of sensationalism. Ideas were derived from sensations. Ideas came from human sensations. So, but the concept changes from the original old idea of the science of ideas to meaning a specific system of ideas. So there is a paradigm shift in the way in which ideology, the concept of ideology, undergoes a change from analysis of ideas, from science of ideas, to the system of ideas. Gramsci points out that historically there have been organic ideologies that were necessary to any given structure. Ideology was there always, and it was very necessary for a structure to be in place. By structure I mean any organization, probably any economic system, probably. Let's say capitalism can be an ideology. Let's say in the government form, libertarianism can be an ideology. And these ideologies are rational and willed. They are the output of the human rational mind. So ideologies are historically necessary. They have been there, but they have a validity which is psychological. It is followed by the human beings. It has got a psychological impact. How? See, because ideologies have organized human masses and have created the terrain on which men have moved, acquired consciousness of their struggle. So the historic aspect of how men have gone about doing their business, by business here I mean how they have acted in society, is all in effect a result of the ideology they follow. How I vote is a part of what is my ideology. How I treat you is an effect of my ideology. Am I a humanist or am I something else? It's a part of what ideology I follow. If I say the truth always, it's part of my ideology. If I follow the king, it's part of my ideology. If I am a rebel to the kingdom, it's part of my ideology. If I vote for a certain party, it's a part of my ideology. So ideology results in the psychological will of the humans, how humans have historically organized and they have moved, and they have acquired consciousness. They have acquired this human will of doing certain things in a certain manner. That is ideology. This is the organic ideology that Gramsci talks about. But in this, Gramsci argues that material forces are extremely important. Material forces. Now, this is a new word that he comes up with. They are the content, according to him. They are the content, and ideologies are the form. So, ideologies and material forces go hand in hand, according to him. One is the content, the other is the form. Material forces are the content, and ideology is the form which carries this content. So material forces would be inconceivable without the form, and ideology would be individual fancies, according to him, if they are not with the material forces. So we will have a look at how he marries these two concepts of the material forces and ideologies, and he has an interesting name for material forces. So what are these material forces? He calls it the cultural themes. So this is the third part of the essay. Cultural themes are ideological material, which we were talking about in the last part of the earlier slide. So ideology and material forces are the form and the content. If materials are the content, ideology is the form. And what are they? They are, according to Gramsci, cultural themes. So the material structure of a dominant class, according to him, is organized, aimed at maintaining, defending and developing this ideological front. So now he comes back to the original idea of the dominant or the ruling class. So how do the dominant or the ruling class defend its dominance, defends the capacity to rule and rule over all the subaltern classes? He says this is done with this ideological front. This maintaining and defending of the dominance by this ruling classes is done through the ideological front, according to Gramsci. What is this ideological front? The most important part of the ideological front, according to Gramsci, is the press, or what we today probably would call as media. They include political newspapers, periodicals of every kind, scientific, cultural, literary, etc., etc. In fact, he mentions that even to the smallest leaflet and pamphlets that are published, they would be one of the most important ideological fronts, because they would carry the ideological material. The ideology would be inherent in this cultural material. But press is not the only idea, although it's one of the most important according to him, it's not the only material. According to him, everything that influences public opinion, everything that has got an effect on the civil society is a cultural or ideological material. So what? So a library is an ideological material for him. Associations, clubs, in fact, so much so that he argues, and now you would understand, the names of streets are also ideological material. Architecture would be ideological material. Let's say you would see there is so much fight over what should be the name of streets. You would come across controversies such as how the name of a particular street, which was named after one of the Mughal emperors, let's say, has been changed into somebody who is from the post-independence era, who represents a completely different worldview and a political affiliation. So this kind of negotiation has been going on from time immemorial, and according to Gramsci, all of this would constitute ideological material because they influence in some way, directly or indirectly, public opinion. And the public opinion, as much as it is opinionated, is dependent on the ideological material that go about in the society. So anything and everything is an ideological material that influences us. And if you consider that that theory, that definition of ideological material, anything and everything around us is an ideological material. Even the names of companies would be ideological material. So let's say the names of how we name our satellites that we send into space would be ideological material. How do we make our food, what are the ingredients that go into making a culinary piece, is also ideological material. Are we cooking beef or are we cooking pork is a result of an ideological material. So the concept of ideological material is actually what, according to Gramsci, is this material structure by which the dominant class rules and tries to develop this ideological front. They won't want to give away the power, and one of the ways in which it holds on to power is through ideological material. It imparts ideology in the minds of people through this ideological. So why do you think government wants control over media and all other aspects of our life? It's because of ideological material. So this is the concept that Antonio Gramsci comes up with, the idea of his subaltern classes, ideology and ideological material. Please go through, as I said, the life of Antonio Gramsci, and come back to the lecture once more again, and I will also give to you some reading materials on it, and you will find that it's not such a difficult topic to understand. Thank you.